Hi everyone. I hope you don't mind the clutter in the background since it's actually yeah, my clothes are hanging or whatever. I just thought that I wanted to make a really quick video. And yeah, I'm not sure how long it's gonna take. It was actually responding to one particular new drama series. Okay, I actually made two different videos about that last time, The Glory, and yeah, it's a Korean drama series. For those who are not aware, it's actually recently being released on Netflix. It was released on March 10th this year. That's for season two. Season one was already released last year. There was something about this particular drama series that I thought was really interesting because of the way that the drama series actually tried to bring up the idea of revenge. It was in the context of bullying because bullying and abuse. Yes. Let's just say that in the context of the first season, we had a flashback after the initial sequence, which was actually an imagined sequence of the abuse victim. Yeah, the abuse victim, Dong, okay, trying to actually so called hit the head or the chief of the bullies, which would be three girls and two men. Okay, she hit that in that particular fantasy sequence at the beginning. She hit that the head of the police. The name being Park Yeon-jin, with a stapler or something that she uses to staple like photographs and everything of everyone onto the walls of her apartment, and saying that how much she relishes killing Yeonjin and everything in as a kind of revenge for what Yeonjin had done to her back in high school. There's this whole idea that after that there was a flashback to what exactly happened to lead to Dong having that particular fantasy. Uh, I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about the artistic parts of the Glory, which actually seemed to be really well done. It was really unexpected. I just told a number of my friends that this second season of the Glory is in fact better than season one because it subverts all your expectations. And why do I say that it subverts all your expectations as an audience? Um, the main thing is this: you if you are expecting the particular drama to have some form of redemption, okay, mainly for the bad characters in which maybe they'll get punished and then they repent, whatever. You will not actually experience that. None of them, okay, among the three bullies, the three female bullies and the two male bullies, none of them have had any chance or nor any desire whatsoever to actually repent of what they had done to Dong'en back in high school. And yes, I mean we know that at the beginning of the second season that Myung-oh, who is the ruffian, the hooligan, the one who helps Sarah Lee, the pastor's daughter, to get drugs, and yeah, he's a gangster and everything. So he's just like let's just say work as a kind of like a go between or like a mule for the other male bully, Jaejun. Okay, but he's already dead by by the end of the first season, he's already dead. We really find out for once that he was dead. It's just that all these flashbacks in season two, um, they give you the impression. I mean, if you just look at the flashbacks, you would think that he's still alive, but no, those are actually flashbacks. So there's something about this particular season because it actually shows you certain things about how uh, poetic justice, yes, and karma is actually being visited upon the bullies. We know that there was one last chance that Dongwon gave the head of the bullies, Yongjin, by meeting up with her and telling her, "I'm giving you one last chance to actually surrender yourself." come forth with all that you had done to me, and not just to me, but even to hurt another girl after me, Yoon So Hee, to cause her death. Yeah, uh, come clean, and this is the last grace that I'm extending to you on account of your, your someone. She was referring to Yeonjin's husband, who actually stepped into Dongwon's apartment with a lot of respect, leaving his shoes behind without stepping into the apartment with his shoes. Um, I think that Dongwon was, she was actually viewing Yeonjin and her husband from a so-called remote camera, yes, outside, while the two of them were inside the apartment. And of course, Yeonjin, being who she is as the psychopath, was actually, or narcissist, or whatever, the bully, terrible person that she was actually, yeah, she was walking around in Dongwon's apartment with the shoes on her feet, and even smoking, and then snubbing out the cigarette with her high heel shoes. So yeah, you get a sense that obviously Yeonjin couldn't care less about other people, and she couldn't care for respect. So, but at the last chance that Yeonjin actually said to, I mean, at that meeting with Dongwon, she said, "Why is it that poor people like you all would always talk about poetic justice and karma? Who is supposed to forgive who?" Okay, and it is the point where you realize that bad people literally do not change. They just get worse and worse with time, or they continue being who they are. And it's a very good drama series as far as I'm concerned, because you will realize that actually by the middle of the 8 episodes of this season, which would be episode 4. Yeah, that's when the beginning of the punishment for the remaining 4 bullies. Yeah, not including Myung-woo, because he was already dead by the end of the first season. By the 4th episode of the uh, second season, that is when the action, all that revenge starts coming to, I mean, becomes unraveled bit by bit. Okay, it affects not just the remaining 4 bullies, such as Sarah, whose drug abuse habits gets unmasked in church actually, yeah, by Dongwon, who actually plants something like a drug with a syringe in a very remote corner of the church. And also she actually gets Sarah to pick up that syringe as part of her ploy, by leaving a very an anonymous message on KakaoTalk, which is in social media, used by Koreans, yeah, to lure her into that trap. And that thing, it escalates as time goes on. Yeonjin was there as well. She witnessed the downfall of Sarah as a drug offender, who's at the same time also a pastor's daughter. How the reputation of yeah, of the person who was failing. And I was like gratuitous. I was actually clapping at the end of the 4th episode, because while Sarah was actually fantasizing on with drugs about different things, you get to see the fantasy that she had of the snake in the Garden of Eden. Okay, yeah, there was a grotto in that particular corner of that church. The grotto, or the painting of Adam and Eve around a tree, uh, which was the tree of the forbidden fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and then with the snake hovering around them on the tree. And so in Sarah Lee's fantasy that she had as a result of drug intoxication, the snake started coming to life, spoke to her in the voice of Myung-woo, who was already dead. And then the snake even metamorphosized into um, Myung-woo's, yeah, physical body, um, talked to her, and then started uh, goading her onto doing something. So we get a sense that, oh, and she started behaving. Sarah doesn't just become very reptilian or serpentine in her way, her mannerisms, while creeping up to Myung-woo, but she also um, starts relieving part of what she was doing uh, months ago, yeah, when she actually was under drug intoxication again, and she actually end up giving Myung-oh some blowjob. Yeah, it was actually part of the whole thing. You realize all these bullies, the five of them, yeah, I mean including Myung, they had something going on among all of them. It's like they didn't just help each other to in terms of bullying Tongan on other people and terrorizing them, they also screwed each other. Oh my goodness. It's like, oh, I was just telling my friends, oh, this is like a Mongolian clusterfuck. I mean, there's a sentence of a clusterfuck. It's literally a clusterfuck. So, yeah, I mean, it was like I kind of realized that it was really being foreshadowed in the relationship between Yeonjin and Jaejun, although Yeonjin was actually married to Ha Do Young, the CEO of Jaepyeong Construction. Yeah, so um, it's very interesting. Yeah, but I mean that was the fourth episode. But I was telling another friend that episode 7, the right at the beginning, actually was another part of the climax because at this point, you know that actually is very nearing the end. Yeonjin's reputation was coming, yeah, it was unraveling. It was really coming to ruins because of what Dongwon did to actually use the social media and all the evidence that she had and posting them online and forcing the police to actually reinvestigate the case of Sohee's murder. And on top of that, there was also in the beginning of the actually episode 7, that was where her mother, Yeonjin's mother, was actually being housed at a shaman's, yeah, a Korean shaman's house, and then she had actually ordered the shaman to perform an exorcism of the dead, the ritual, um, and also to actually kill to pacify the souls of the dead that Yeonjin's mother and Yeonjin had actually killed. Yeah, we know that Yeonjin's mother is no different from her daughter. You know, as you know, the fruit does not fall far from the tree. Okay, so they're basically cut out in the same way. But that was something just quite interesting because at the very beginning of the 7th episode, which was actually one episode away from episode number 8, the final episode of season 2, there was one really interesting example of what happens with the so-called poetic justice or karma because the shaman actually was dancing with her sword and doing all this. It's like this whole thing about dancing a sword and waving them, brandishing them. It's part of the so-called sword dance, yeah, but it's also a shamanistic ritual. Yeah, that was where the sword dance actually probably originated from, Korean shamanism. There was something about that action she was doing. She was trying to invoke the gods to pacify the spirits, but she was also possessed by the spirit of Sohee. Yeah, she started speaking in another like different, slightly younger, not younger voice, but a lower, slightly higher register. Yeah, and Yeonjin was there witnessing, and she started saying, "I saw this ghost. I think she was referring to the ghost of Sohee, that she saw as a shaman, and right at the very end, she collapsed." Okay, the collapse was being explained. You see, I mean, for those who understand Korean, there is actually one term called pojeon. In shamanism, pol means punishment. I'm trying to figure out what the other word son could probably mean in Chinese or Korean because with all these terms come from Chinese as well. Um, uh, Pojeon is actually basically the punishment from the gods. It's the ultimate. It's like a kind of punishment because of sacrilege. So because we know that actually Yeonjin's mother is very superstitious, much like Yeonjin, that they go and find the shaman, and Yeonjin's mother especially, she trusts so much in the shaman above everything else, asking the shaman to even to hex the husband of Hyungnam, who actually now knows who the the murderer or so he is and everything, trying to use it to actually intimidate and coerce Yeonjin's mother to pay him lots and lots of money despite his abusive nature to Hyungnam, the ex-mate who actually tries to help Dongeun. So it is so amazing because at that point in time, when the shaman collapses, her daughter, who is also like a assistant to her and probably I think a trainee shaman as well, she starts running, getting she panics because after realizing, oh, my mom has experienced pojon, which is a punishment from the gods. She's struck dead on the spot in the middle of the ritual, and it was like her heart had failed on her. There was nothing. uh, it was a crazy scene. It was snowing. Dong'er was watching at the corner. Yeonji had basically run away because she was so scared of the idea that the shaman could see the spirits of those people she had hurt who are already dead, and and there was this idea, yeah, and then the whole thing about the scene was a total mess because her daughter and another shaman assistant, they got so scared that they even started running, but they tripped and fell and they crashed into all those offerings for the gods and spirits. Yeah, it is so satisfying, and I would say that yeah, it was very well written, especially because I think that a lot of people were asking this question. That with movies and drama series which revolve around the idea of bullying or abuse, there's always this idea. I think it's common even in the case of Korean dramas. There's this idea of forgiveness. Yes, forgiveness was one thing that was always, not always, but mostly uh, raised as a kind of issue or main alternative to or an end to the whole a solution to everything in a lot of these Korean drama series. So of course, online pundits were talking about these two different choices between forgiveness and exacting revenge. I mean, people always say that forgiving someone or forgiving, even just, even not forgiving, but at least moving on and just not looking back, and not revisiting the past, as opposed to staying on in the past and trying to exact revenge. Why shouldn't Dong'en, the abuse victim, choose to actually move on? But I think that the drama series, I mean, if she had moved on, there wouldn't be much of a real so-called, there would be redemption, obviously, in the sense not of anyone but of Dong'en predominantly, and it was also called, like, implied. I mean, it would be very predictable in a sense, just judging by the idea of, like, what Christianity is talking about in terms of forgiving people or whatever. But Dong'en didn't choose that. So, and why did she choose to exact revenge? And it's very ironic because if you were to just watch it till the end, you realize that actually Dong'en didn't really do that much. She didn't really exact violence against Yeonjin. She was just basically unmasking Yeonjin. So there was one, okay, spoilers. There's one particular scene because we know that actually Yeonji has already killed Myung-woo by the end of the first season. Why? How did then must Dong'en actually try to get Yeonjin also indicted, not just for the murder of Sohee years ago, but also for that's like 18 years ago, yeah, and also for the current murder of Myung-woo. One of the most ingenious thing that I think from an artistic point of view, that the script and the plot actually managed, was where Yeonjin actually visits the plastic surgeon's clinic, which was actually the clinic of Ju Yo-jung, yeah, okay, the plastic surgeon who was actually in love with Dong'en. Yeah, he offered to help Dong'en to exact the revenge plan. So, and at the very clinic, obviously, Yeonjin's friend, open close inverted commas, or one of her fellow bullies, Hae-jung, was actually having a procedure. And this later, the Yeojong manages to actually, in the midst of the quarrels between the two of them, the two women, Yeojong manages to persuade, somehow get some kind of confidence with Yeonjin, who in the end actually visits him in the middle of the night, um, to get a surgery, like a surgical procedure, like I think fillers, yeah. And while she was being anesthetized, she was being, like, doped and drugged, so she couldn't really remember anything. Um, Yo-jung, Ju Yo-jung, actually, the doctor, actually extracts a sample of skin from that scar that she has sustained on her feet while killing Myung-woo. And it was found out later on that in fact Dong-eun and Yo-jong had actually purchased the funeral home where Myung-woo's body was being hidden. Okay, they managed to find out, and they actually placed that skin sample back on Myung-woo's body. It was ingenious because you know that considering Yeonjin's carefulness, she gets people to help her, like including a police officer who was having a so-called, I won't say affair, but like a deal with her mother. And one of the things that the policeman did was to hide the body, clean up the body at least of Myung-woo to remove those skin samples. And obviously Yeonjin would actually probably burn off all her coat and everything, and wash herself clean so that all these traces of Myung-woo's DNA wouldn't remain on her body. So the idea of planting that bit of her body, her DNA, via her skin sample on her feet back on Myung-woo's body was a really ingenious point. Yeah. So I mean she wasn't I mean Dong-eun wasn't even exactly creating a lie. She was just planting the sort of like new evidence that was lost back on the body of the victim, of one of the victims. Not really victim, but yeah, one of the fellow bullies, to get Yeonjin back in trouble. And then she was always calling the police on anonymous tips, which obviously the police were aware. Yeah, someone is trying to help us, but also trying to get Yeonjin into trouble. So yeah, so this is one thing about the whole drama series. Okay, I'm giving way too much of spoilers and everything. But there's something else that I think I really want to just talk about concerning the idea of vengeance and as opposed to forgiveness. Why, just to return to that point, why did Dong-eun choose vengeance? I think that if we were to look at the way the plot developed, um, of course, they always call it the higher way to forgive, but their characters had no redemption. So in every sense, I think Dong had the right to exact revenge, and she had to earn back her time because there was one part in the ending where she actually went to visit um, the grave. Is it the grave or the? Oh, she went to visit the funerary urn. Yeah, of So-hee, who was murdered by or killed by Yeonjin, and she said we're finally 19. Okay, this is a very important part. The hint that's given in the plot itself, because you know that for abuse victims, when they are being abused, a lot of the trauma doesn't exactly it doesn't resolve itself immediately, and for some of them it actually stops. And that was Dong-eun and So-hee were both 18 when they were abused by Yeonjin and the gang. And so to imply that we're finally 19, that was what she said to the picture of the young So-hee in front of the funerary urn. She was implying that they have both in a way moved on and healed from um, the trauma. They are no longer stuck in the past. I think if you look at it this way, the brain, I think, is also very important, because most of us, when we are stuck in trauma, a lot of us don't realize this, but I think the brain, there's this one part of the brain is called the amygdala. The amygdala is the processing center for the memories. So the amygdala actually it doesn't really process memories in terms of time, in terms of like past, present, future. And because of that, it has a pretty screwed up, I would say that especially in trauma, the amygdala tends to actually process it in terms of like a perpetual present. This in itself is actually why we are always stuck in that moment. We keep on reliving it as if it's right now, although it could have happened like years and years ago. And when she said that we are finally 19 now, she's implying the idea of moving on and healing. I think it's quite strange that sometimes there are a lot of plot details and everything. I mean, but it really seems to say some things about abuse and how you heal. Of course, I'm not telling you to behave like Dong-eun and go exact revenge. This is not what you should be doing, but it does imply that a lot of things that when we have trauma, we are stuck in the past. We can't move on. And another thing was also the idea of healing. How do you actually heal? This Yo-jong keeps on telling Dong-eun, to sometimes he said that as a practicing plastic surgeon who was also trained in dermatology. He said, sometimes to actually allow the skin to heal from a cut or wound. He said, as a dermatologist, we actually have to make an incision in the area that's being hurt. Yeah, that's what he said. And then uh, that incision is going to hurt, but it removes the wound and stimulates the skin to actually to heal itself. Uh, which was kind of like surprising. So he was suggesting that with Donglen's wounds that she had on her hands and her legs, that were burned by the curling iron in the first season. I think back when she was 18. He was suggesting that when he actually makes when he tries to remove those scars, he said that you have to actually have to go deep down, to dive deep, to remove those scars, to make a deeper cut into the skin before the scars can actually heal. And he said, you know what, with this surgical procedures, the skin will never exactly return to the state it was before it was being burned, but it can get really close. Okay, and then that was the one thing that I think the whole thing that justifies the idea of um, Donglen's revenge or her agenda, because I think to her it was the best way to move on. She cannot move on without having taking her revenge to expose the bullies and the abusers. And on top of that, in a way, she was like, I think that thing was in that a revenge was in a way of actually cutting deeper into her skin, not her skin, but her own psyche, which was already damaged by the abuse and trauma. Yeah. So there's a few images which I think motifs which stand out a lot in the drama itself, the two, even the season 1 and season 2. I think season 2 especially, I mean, compared to season 1, season 1 had a thing about these two flowers, but devil's trumpet and angel's trumpet, which I told you are poisonous, but they represent two different camps of the characters. But like angel's trumpet around the bad characters, representing some form of divine justice, while the devil's trumpet, which is around Donglen and a few other good characters, suggest some kind of vengeance. Yeah, that was ironically carried out by what we would think of as the devil, but and yeah, the devil's trumpet. But I think in this season, the motifs are a bit more different, because if you watch the opening credits, um, which are not really part of the plot itself. You see certain images, like for example a girl clothed in a dress, the back of a girl clothed in a dress, a white dress, which is draped over the snow. It's reminding you of Dong'en, who tried to, as an 18-year-old girl who was being burned, she tried to wash her wounds, to remove them by using the snow to cover her wounds, but it couldn't work. Yeah. So the idea of metamorphosizing, like a moth or a butterfly coming out of the shell, the cocoon, the snow, she's reborn only by vengeance. And there was this other image which stood out, that one of the snake. It was like the eye of the snake before it actually started twirling around and around, and then it was hovering over Donglen's head. So I know that it's really creepy and scary to some people, especially from the Christian background, because obviously the snake was used by Satan or the devil to cause Adam and Eve to fall. But in the plot, as we know, based on episode 4 at least, based on what Sarah Lee saw while she was under drug intoxication, the snake was actually also representing the vengeance that Donglen had against her, because she was I mean, Sarah Lee was the pastor's daughter, but she abused her father's relation, her father's position, everything. So it was like a way of saying that the Donglen was, in a way, the snake was a symbol of justice, via the most cruel thing, that it actually bite Sarah and maybe her family, who was actually enabling her, in the feet. Yeah, symbolically. And of course there are some other images like crystals and knives. Oh yeah, the knives at the end of opening credits. the knives or the scalpels that on the the plastic surgeon's operating table, and they will like line up one after the other with Yu Jong, the plastic surgeon's face in the background, in between, sandwich in between. Yeah, there's like a gates, like a jaws, but it's very clear to. I mean, it actually alludes to what Yo Jong was saying about making the cut, but it was also suggesting the whole thing about vengeance against his father's murderer, who was a psychopath, and a serial rapist. Yeah, it's really awesome, but there is a cliffhanger. I won't talk so much about the cliffhanger, but as I always say, like cliffhangers like this make you think that is that drama going to have a season 3, and it won't be any more of the glory of Dong in trying to redeem her life. But I think it seems like it was hinting at Yo Jong, but yeah, who actually in the end, like Dong actually did fall in love with, but it was like yeah, it's something that I think it leaves us to guess, but we won't know. Okay, this is very typical of a lot of Korean drama series like this. And it was, I think, the script writer was more well known for Descendants of the Sun. But she was also pretty well known for having drama series which don't really always end well. So some people are wondering what will happen. But I just want to assure that everyone who has watched this or who are going to watch it, justice is indeed served. Okay, all the 5 bullies. I mean, Miao is really dead by the first season, but the remaining 4 bullies were really punished in the most spectacular and unexpected ways. And even for, let's say, Jeju, who was he was another kind of like a covert narcissist or whatever. Um, he's punished as well. Yeah, he's punished by being because he's color blind, but he's really blinded by something else in his eye drops, which was planted again by Haejong, who he was screwing. Okay, how he ends up there, I will not give a game away, but he wasn't killed by Haejong. That was the irony of it all. There was someone else, one of the other characters outside of the circle of bullies who actually killed him, and it's very unexpected. We wouldn't see his face, that killer's face, but we know who the killer is based on the tie that he was wearing. Okay, the color of tie he was wearing before the next day we see that person with another character. Okay, anyway, that's it for now. It's a very long ramble about the glory, and yeah, it's a really good drama series, and I think that for people like who have been not just interested in psychology, but even things like who wants to know something a little bit more about the mindset of what goes on what goes on in character disturbed people, and also people who are actually suffering from trauma. It gives you a view of what is really happening in their mindsets. Why do they end up doing such things